YouTube and all that. So we're now moving further into transgenerational stress. I'm the one that doesn't have the cover on the book as well. It's ripped it up because I've used it so many times. It's like gotten fallen apart. We're journeying through the Adaptability Paradigm, which was initiated and evolved by my dear friend, the Guardian, Dr. Rob Sinnott. Dr. Rob, you know how much I feel about you. Don't know if you're back from Mexico yet, but if you are, welcome back. If you're not, I'm glad you're having fun in Mexico. So, essentially what we're kind of gone through is I'm the wrapper-upper now, and I make these guys do the thinking. We're talking about how the autonomic nerve system, which is that system that controls and regulates every gland, organ, whatever else in the human body, its job is to create vegetative homeostasis for the organism. The functions, in a nutshell, of the autonomic nervous system: speed up or slow down, gas pedal or brake. We have the technology, like $6 Million Man. We have the technology. You don't remember the $6 Million Man, but it was really cool. We have the technology to measure the function of the autonomic nerve system, which is measuring adaptability. So if the body's in a state of distress, dominant sympathetic, adaptation is poor, you become very stress vulnerable. What we do as your chiropractors is we identify which segment or segments in which component of the autonomic nerve system, sympathetic or parasympathetic, to move you toward a more state of stress resilience. That only occurs one way, people out there in chiropractic world and Facebook world. That occurs through the specific chiropractic adjustment. Now, I know that may seem weird, but that's what chiropractors do, is adjust. We focus on that specific adjustment. So what we're going to go into today is further into transgenerational stress. What that is that stress upon the mother onto the developing child, the fetus, and how it alters and increases the cortisol level. As Dr. Frank Orr covered last week, when that cortisol level is elevated, they're heavier. And that changes the genetic structure called epigenetics. So this is what's really cool. By chiropractic care alone, the adjustments alone, we can enhance the lives of people, mothers, developing babies, so they can live to their full potential. What a great way for a child to get a start in life.
It's pretty good.
Starting off stress resilience versus starting off in a state of stress vulnerability. There's nobody else that does that except chiropractors who specifically adjust. Like us dudes here at Chiro World, because that's what we do. So with that, I now transfer it over to your second, right?
Yeah.
All right, Dr. Flagg.
All right, so we're looking at the behinding mechanism of sympathetic overload. And what I'm going to be covering is adrenal fatigue. Now, this is something where they used to look back in about, 40, 50 years ago, and that doesn't exist. It's all in your head. But they've actually looked, and a lot of science has come out that this is a real thing. And basically how adrenal fatigue works, it starts by the stimulatory aspect. It looks like cortisol. Now, what initially stimulates that is what system?
It's the autonomic nerve system.
They have the nerve system. So this all starts with the nerve system telling everything what to do.
Wait, so you're trying to say the nerve system controls and regulates everything in the human body?
Well, according to science, yes.
Weird. Weird.
Science.
Weird. Just think the very same science that goes, nerves don't do that. Whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a nerve that goes to that.
Kristen, is there a nerve that goes to that?
Yeah.
Weird.
Weird.
So essentially there's two different cycles we look at. Now, the body has a way to ramp up cortisol in your body and also a way to downregulate and deregulate it. So cortisol essentially will affect the brain. It goes in and affects your serotonin levels, which will come forward and stimulate CRF, which is corticotropin releasing factor.
Say that 3 times. Cortisol releasing.
Corticotropin
releasing factor. I feel like I'm in oh my gosh, what was his name? At Palmer.
Oh, which one?
Yeah, I feel like I'm in endocrinology right now. Anyway.
So I'll make it brief. So CRF will essentially go into the body and increase more cortisol. So it ramps things up. Now, the body has a way to balance this out. And so basically has a system in the body where it combats this, and this is in the brain, where it'll actually learn to turn it off after a certain degree. So in the brain, the what system?
Nerve system.
Yeah.
Weird.
So looking at that, if everything's working like it should, your body has a natural way to down-regulate things. But when it becomes overwhelmed...
If it's working right.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you a question. Let's say there is another paradigm out there that if it's not working right, Do they look at the nerve system, or do they just add drugs?
Drugs.
Okay. Which alters body chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do we see a madness here? We've gone through how many weeks of this now? A lot. Many weeks.
Yeah.
We should look and see when we started this.
Yeah.
That's your homework. So, we have to work this afternoon. Somebody's going to go home and play video games.
You know, ride bikes.
Did you get your training wheels off?
Yeah.
That's awesome. So that is so cool. But here's what's funny. For so many weeks, we've gone down this journey, right? Of the nerve system controls and regulates. What I want out there, post your questions below here, or your input below. Why would you add chemistry, or more chaos to something that is naturally regulated by the nerve system that we interact with? Carry on.
So, I mean, that's about it. The body has a way of regulating and keeping itself healthy as long as everything's working like it should. And so, when it's not working like it should, that's where it starts to affect, especially with pregnant moms, future generations with a developing baby.
Epigenetics.
Epigenetics.
Pretty good. Good. So we talked about adrenal fatigue, we talked about respiratory issues, allergies, asthma, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes.
Oh, that's crazy to think that can be regulated by the nerve system.
PTSD, cognitive functions,
Crazy.
hormone balance,
It's getting crazier.
healthy weight, behavioral issues.
My cortisol levels are raising.
These are some of the diseases that we've talked about so far. That's just tip of the iceberg.
Now, wait a minute. These diseases you're talking about,
Uh-huh.
that there are some out there that go, chiropractors are nuts for saying that. Tell me if I'm right or wrong, but is this peer-reviewed stuff that you've got reference on this?
I would say there's a few.
99, actually.
99 in this chapter.
Interesting.
In this chapter-
Interesting.
in this
Of
chapter
the
alone.
same people who say, no, there's research out there. Maybe they're not reading the research. Maybe they're not drinking their own Kool-Aid.
Weird.
Wacky.
So there is a plethora of issues that can come about because of stress, vulnerability, and that starts as early as mom being pregnant to that child. That's very, very important. So most people live in a sympathetic dominant world, which is very unfortunate.
Gas pedal world.
Exactly. So fight or flight, so Dr. Rob, specific quote, fight or flight is meant to be a short-term event followed by restoration of an unstressed state.
Okay, now stop right there. So what he is saying, that we should not constantly be like this right here.
Correct.
But do we live life that way?
No.
Shortens our lifespan, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So, and I don't want to run from a lion my entire life because eventually I'm going to get caught.
Saber-tooth tiger.
Okay, saber-tooth tiger. Anyway, when the body's trying to heal itself, it can't do that. It can't do it very well or efficient when you're in that sympathetic dominant state.
Let's give an example of a sympathetic dominant state. Now that it's wintertime in Nebraska, although it is 50-some degrees today, imagine when you go out and you get in your car and you go to warm it up, but the gas pedal sticks. Sympathetic dominant, so what's the car doing?
Revving.
Over time, what's going to happen to that engine?
It's going to burn out.
It's going to burn out. And that's mechanics. So think about
Well,
the
you're
body.
also, you're going to use more gas faster,
Mhm.
which creates what? What you talking about?
More cortisol.
Oh, more cortisol, yeah.
Adrenal fatigue.
Yeah.
Body's exhausted. It's going to run out faster. The body can't heal. Engine can't heal.
Shuts off.
Exactly. It's going to
Now
shut
your
down.
car's no longer warm.
So that's why we do a specific chiropractic evaluation for specific chiropractic adjustments.
Oh, you're setting him up.
Exactly.
Got it.
But it's so important. So the body can restore back to its normal, optimal state.
And what you're trying to say, let me get this right, because you're being a little weird now. You talked about, and I'm being sarcastic, you talked about a bunch of like diseases that is peer reviewed, literature supports it,
Yep.
that due to vulnerability can occur, that if we calm down the nerve system via specific chiropractic adjustment, the possibility, according to the research, can be altered.
Absolutely.
Weird.
Getting closer to vegetative
Homeostasis. Thank you, Dr. Rifty. Your turn.
Okay, so I'm going to talk and add on to this mom being not healthy, her nerve system not working well, body not adapting well, passing on to baby. But we're also going to add in dad. Because if dad's body is stressed out, that's going to affect his DNA that he's going to pass on to those children. So the two of them together, if we add that to that baby, what's the starting baseline for that baby.
Stress vulnerability.
Stress vulnerability.
Yeah.
So, when this happens, when these babies, that sperm and egg come together and they start to develop, the first thing that starts to form is the nerve system. The first thing that nerve system does is tries to develop and start to basically branch off into all these different parts of the brain and then down into the rest of the body to create this human body. The problem occurs is when they are stressed out like this and under huge amounts of stress from mom and dad, so having a less than optimal starting point, those children, instead of developing in their frontal lobe, which is where their personality, creativity, motor function, memory, language, judgment, impulse control, and behavior, instead of their body being able to function normally in those aspects, they shift back to what's called their hindbrain, which is down at the base of your brain. This puts them into what's called a primitive state, which is where all their body does is live out of a state of fear and basically what's going to happen next, which we've been talking about this whole time.
This is in the developing child.
This is in the developing child.
I strongly suggest you go back and listen to what he just said there like a few times, because that's pretty powerful. And even the chiropractors out there, I'd strongly suggest go back and listen to that. Patients out there, potential patients out there, go back and listen to that. That's because you think about how we're starting off life in these kids. That's pretty deep.
It's amazing.
Thanks for bringing dads into it.
Well, it's true. So, and we'll get into a lot of the stuff that I went over this weekend.
Okay.
This is where we talked a lot about this. So what that's going to do is these children being born, now their creativity is decreased. So if you think about a kid whose imagination, typically you want that thing to run wild and function amazing and do all these fun creative things. Well, now their body is set back into a fight or flight state where they're always in a state of stress. They're not going to be very creative in that state. If you think about when you're stressed out at home, how often are you creative and able to think of things and do things?
I just hit something. So here's what happens now. Let's think about this. So now we take this kid. Holy cow. Think about the I'm kind of ticked off right now. Think about how big Pharma has just dominated this. Because they know this stuff. I mean, they know the research is out there. They got really smart people reading the articles.
Yep.
So now we have a child who's born not creative. That kid's sitting in school. The kid's doing what? Staring off.
Yep.
Kid's got ADD. Let's dope him up.
Yep.
So they're going to get him no matter what. God, is anybody ticked off besides me?
So not only decreases creativity, obviously their critical thinking ability. So when I said judgment, language, their impulse control, their memories, all those critical things that kids should be able to do, starting to learn math, being able to read and write, do those simple things that it takes to be a human being in our society, in our community.
A non-doped up one.
Exactly. They're not able to develop those things as a healthy child would. So now that's going to set them back. It increases their susceptibility to disease because if your body's in a flight or fight state, and we can go into that too, and go into.
Okay, now stop you here. Let's say that's child number one. Mom and dad have another child, but they're worried about that child. They're already stressed. Now they double down on the stress.
Yep.
I would be curious, Dr. Rob, I got a question for you. Second, third siblings, is their stress level, cortisol levels higher? Let's see if there's some research out there. Sorry, Dr. Rob.
Well, that's going to depend on if mom and dad have done anything to change.
If they haven't, that's what I said, haven't done
If
anything.
they haven't done anything, then it's going to be.
I'm doubling down, saying it's even worse.
Yep.
And if that second, third, that sibling, their body weight is greater.
Yep.
Because the cortisol levels.
Exactly.
Yep. So where a lot of this research, where they found this from, is in cases of abandonment. So if you think about a child who's been abandoned, they've been foster homes, basically taken away from parents, or parents just didn't want them. These children, during that, so the increase of stress in pregnancy, which most of those kids who were abandoned had a stressful they were in a uterus that was extremely stressed out. So now that during that time period and the first 9 months of life is a huge stage where all of this stuff is set in. And so if none of that is changed, then if they're not getting adjusted and there's not things that are helping to decrease those ways their body is adapting to that stress, because it's not adapting at that point, their body is their life is set up for every failure you could possibly think of. That's going to happen with that child.
Well, and here's what's even worse, Dr. Price, is the allopathic plan is what? Dope them up, dope them up, dope them up, and so they can continue to set them up for failure. Wow.
So the last thing, and this was a pretty cool thing. So Dr. Bruce Lipton, I'm sure you guys have heard of him before. He talks a lot about epigenetics. He was a cool cell biologist. He called these kids street fighters. And the reason he called them that was because they have extremely well-developed primitive brain, which is their survival skills, so your body's ability to survive stressful periods. But they also had well-developed limbs, because in a state of stress survival, you have to be able to get the heck out of there or fight. So they had very well-developed limbs, but their internal organs and everything inside of them was extremely lower developed. So these are kids going to have heart issues, lung issues, digestive issues, you name it. Anything to do
More
with
customers.
them. Exactly.
More customers for Big
So,
Pharma.
that was a huge study that and a lot of things that he was noticing in his research that was happening. So then, to finish this off, the research that is now showing is that adjustments are actually increasing this prefrontal lobe cortex function. So it's one way of being able to help these kids that don't have an optimal, or in my term, fair start. Now we can actually help to start.
Can I use that term too?
Sure.
Okay.
See how.
You guys can. I got permission.
May I?
Sure.
Thank you, can I?
Yes. And you guys can too. So, but that adjustment is going to now help to start to shift that brain function from that posterior or that primitive brain up to the frontal cortex, and actually start to help these kids move towards a more optimal, healthy life, because their body's now adapting better. Their body's not creating so many of these stress hormones that they were starting out with. So, pretty cool stuff.
Rewind. One
Whoa, rewind. All right, so I'm going to wind it down here because we try to have it done in 15 minutes, and I only went 2 minutes because I knew, a PhD over here. PhD, he was like,
I went to a seminar.
He
You
was-
guys should have been there.
yeah, anyway, so here it is. I suggest you watch this one a couple times, maybe more and more. Pass it on, share with the friends. Hey, take it to your pediatrician. Ask them. Take it to your big pharma rep and go, why? Why are you doing this? They know. The research is out there. There's chiropractors out there that haven't stepped up and bought this book yet, so you understand. Buy it.
Yep.
The research is there. The research is it's what we do.
Yep.
Me personally, I'm going to pick his brain a little bit because that was really good. I guess next week we're still going to hit transgenerational stress. Probably a couple more weeks.
Mm-hmm.
But do you kind of see how this stuff overlaps? And the ADD, that just hit me right there. We've got a couple more weeks on transgenerational stress. I got some articles we're going to cover from Dr. Rob on transgenerational stress. But I got to tell you what, gang, it's out there. There's absolutely no reason that every mom, dad, child is not being checked for stress vulnerability. If you think there's a reason, post it down here.
Yep.
If you're enjoying stress resiliency, put it right down here. Let us know how your lives have been changed. Because I got to tell you what, I see it every day. Been seeing it for almost 30 years. These dudes combined 50 years been seeing this stuff. It happens. We do it. We do it with specific chiropractic care. Here at Chiro World, we're out. We'll see you next week.